So in case you were not here on this day, here is what we did for the day. So we did start with the causes of World War II, just a short lecture. So I gave you time to get all the notes down. So what we wanted to start with was the Treaty of Versailles. So again, remember, please be doing your active listening notes. This video is so that you can be doing that in the side. So we've talked about the Treaty of Versailles a lot. Unit 5, at the end of it, you had an essay on your test. Unit 6, we talked about it for that interwar period. So now here, again, Treaty of Versailles, why was it so significant? It does end World War I. And again, remember, the US does not sign this treaty. This is when we did enter that big isolationist period where we tried to stay out of international affairs. The Treaty of Versailles is going to punish Germany very severely. We saw, we looked at that one document, 6 different things that it did to punish Germany, specifically with their economy and taking full blame, right? This is going to be seen as the largest factor that led to the outbreak of World War II. So not just the treaty, but what it would eventually mean. And what do I mean by that? Well, Germany's punishments, they had to accept full blame for World War I. So that's kind of going to create this resentment in Germany. Again, they had all of that propaganda about they were winning the war the whole time, and then suddenly they lose. How can that possibly be? So they're not going to be really trusting of a whole lot of the European Union, right? They had to give up their colonies and land. So again, a lot of World War I, they felt like this was their chance for an empire. The rest of Europe had their opportunities for empire. This is finally ours. We're finally getting colonies and land. And now they almost immediately had to give it up, whereas other empires got to keep it for hundreds of years. And then finally had to pay massive amounts of war debt to the Allies. So again, that's why it's also part of that largest factor that leads to the outbreak of war. Treaty of Versailles led to this, which is going to lead to the ruining of the German economy, where we saw that German money was useless. People were burning it to stay warm. People were starving. The government couldn't do anything to stop it. And so something is going to have to change, right? But also, beyond just Germany, the whole world was in Great Depression, right? You'll learn a lot more about this in US history, but it really does affect the whole world. It is not just a US-centered thing. So this is going to be an event that lasts about 10 years, starting in October of 1929. And what was life in the Great Depression like? Well, there was very high unemployment. Can compare it to today, where I think unemployment's around 3%. It was significantly higher during this time period. 3%, they would have laughed at that during the Great Depression. They did have massive food shortages, as we saw in Germany, but we are going to really be seeing that all over the world. There were unstable and unpopular governments. The people saw that their governments couldn't change this depression, so they want to change that, right? So this is going to lead to the rise of fascist and authoritarian governments. We're especially going to see the Great Depression leading to this in Japan, as we kind of talked about in the interwar period. The Soviet Union is before this, but we are still going to see that authoritarian government in Soviet Union, Italy, Germany. Great Depression is a big part of it. It's just not the only part of why people turn to that form of government. So another cause that we're going to be looking at is imperialism in general, right? We looked at Japan. So during that 1 week, they are going to start to imperialize other countries because Great Depression made it to where they couldn't get all these resources. So now they're just going to try to take it. So we saw the Manchurian incident in China. We looked into that. Italy, which we did not really focus on, is going to invade Ethiopia. Why is this significant? Ethiopia was pretty much the only African country not colonized during our Unit 4 imperialism. Liberia would also count, but that one I kind of put as a gray area because the US kind of imperialized that, but kind of colonized it. It's not as straightforward as Ethiopia, who had stayed independent. And now they're finally going to be invaded by Italy. And Germany, as we've been looking at the last couple classes, the annexation of Austria, to where the Allies were kind of like, well, that's okay, because they identify with the Germans. And then annexation of especially the Sudetenland, where the Allies were like, well, that's kind of okay. But then they take all of Czechoslovakia, and the Allies are really starting to get worried because Germany is starting to expand, right? So why were dictators so successful in this period? So some of the traits of authoritarian governments, they would channel people's anger by scapegoating a common enemy. So we especially always focus on the Nazis with scapegoating the Jewish people. It is not going to just be Jewish people. It's going to be drug addicts. It's going to be gay people. It's going to be the Roma and the Sinti people, right? The Jews get the most coverage because they were the most affected, but we are going to see that whole government really scapegoat anyone who is not Aryan, right? A common thing we're also going to see is the use of secret police, the Stasi or the Gestapo, to terrorize and intimidate the people, right? So everyone's always looking over their shoulder. They always have to be supporting the government. Otherwise, they could just be taken away in a police car and not really be told why or something like that. So it creates this unease in the government or in the country where you have to be so supportive of your government. We're going to see massive military spending and the glorification of military, and extreme nationalism and extreme patriotism. Shouldn't have to think that far back to see why this was not a good idea. We just have to look back at causes of World War I, which was about 20 years before this, right? And the exact same thing happened. Alliances are also going to be formed to protect the different regimes. So we're going to see the Tripartite Pact, which is going to become known as more of the Axis powers. Sorry. So we're going to see that main alliance of kind of the bad guys with the enemies between Germany, Italy, and Japan. I think Italy actually used a different flag at that time. Sorry. And what action was being taken to stop them? How are the Allies trying to prevent this war? Well, as we went over with that one class, there's that idea of appeasement, policy of making concessions to a dictator in order to avoid war. What was the problem with this that we saw? Well, Hitler could see that the Allies were really trying really hard just to appease them. So they are starting to realize that these countries are just trying to avoid war no matter what. So we can really push the boundaries. They grow their military much bigger than the Treaty of Versailles allowed. They expand their territory, which the Treaty of Versailles didn't allow. And the Allies do almost nothing. So Hitler is almost seeing it as this point to where, like, how far can I push them? How much land can I take before they even start to push back at all? Which is eventually going to lead to World War II starting with Nazi Germany invading Poland in 1939, which we will get into more later, but that is kind of going to be seen as the official start of World War II. Germany is going to invade Poland. Great Britain's going to say, if you do that, we're going to declare war on you. And Germany's like, bet. And they do it, and then war is declared on them. So following that lecture, there was a time for you to write your reflection again. Then following that, we are going to look into political cartoons and the role that it plays. So we're going to watch this Donald Duck cartoon. One thing, keep in mind, this is supposed to be portraying the Nazis in a bad way, right? I had a student already talk to me about this, how they thought that because they were using the swastika, they were supporting Hitler. No, the point of this was not Disney supporting Hitler. It was showing how bad Hitler was, right? And especially focusing on Donald Duck because he is considered part of the Navy and given the rank of soldier and a discharge. Think of that whatever you want. And that's going to lead us into the main activity we do for this day. So it is going to be political cartoons, an introduction. So we're going to be looking at 4 different political cartoons today. And the first thing I wanted you doing is just kind of looking at how are political cartoons used? What do they draw? So that's why we're looking at all of these different techniques that political cartoonists will use to try to push their message or get their message across. So I want you reading all of that. We'll be reading it in class together. And then continuing on to lead this. So we are going to be specifically looking at Dr. Seuss political cartoons. So you're going to choose 2 of the 4 political cartoons we look at. We'll look at them first, and then I'll give you time to do it. There's a lot of questions you answer for all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you're going to choose 2 cartoons and fill out all 7 questions for those cartoons. All right. So just a quick overview of what they look like. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're looking at those cartoons. What was the point of the message? What was Dr. Seuss trying to get across? And then at the end of the day, you will have an exit ticket. I just have not made it yet. So be looking for that.